Welcome back, everyone. Over to you, Kevin.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Next up, we have Janine Mitchem from L'Oreal, who's Director of Creative Ops. And Janine's going to tell us about cultivating creativity and enhancing productivity. Over to you, Janine.
Hey, hello, and thank you for joining my session, as Kevin said, on cultivating creativity and enhancing productivity. My name is Janine Mitchem, and I am the current Director of Creative Operations at L'Oreal for the Professional Product Division, covering the brands Redken, Matrix, and Biolage. Though before I got here, I started my career in art history. I always had an appreciation for the arts and knew I wanted a career that would allow me to remain a part of the creative process. One of the biggest influences that led to my working with graphic designers was my time working at a museum exhibit design firm headquartered in Washington, D.C. It was here that I really began to understand the designer mindset, to figure out what they needed in order to create and what I could do to get the most out of them with client demands, budget constraints, and looming deadlines taking over. Today, I want to talk with you about the overarching elements designers need to stay motivated for the work structure. One of the quotes I feel best describes what I've taken to be key in working in operations is from Maya Angelou, where it says, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." As operations professionals, we are not here to coddle. We are not teachers. So from my experience, it can feel like we are constantly herding cats. But we are here to make sure we are managing successful teams. Our jobs are done on time, within budget, and in a manner that's pleasing to the client. However, I believe for that to happen, it's all in how we engage with our teams and clients. I know for me, I have to be the calm in the midst of the storm, right? While everyone else is running around in circles trying to get things done, this is especially true for the designers. I like to think that there are two types of designers: the ones who are super organized and left brain, and the ones whose files are never ever cleaned up. Both can yield amazing work, but how they get there is so different. So what does that lead us to today? One of the topics I want to talk about today is on listening. We're looking at defining the objective, how everyone has a story, and we as operations people are the bridge. So whether we're working under a traditional or pod structure, creating a culture of transparency and support can allow for collaboration as well as individual ownership. So then how do we get there, right? What is the big secret for driving productivity? Listening. We are all managing and balancing so many different things during the workday that it is easy to lose sight of what really needs to happen to get the most out of people. From my experience, you have to take it back to basics and ask yourself, what is it that I need to do to make the right assumptions and ask the right questions to drive success? I'm not here actually representing L'Oreal. However, it is through my experience working across so many functions of the business that I can speak to what drives a successful operation and design team. L'Oreal, as the largest beauty conglomerate, is broken into separate divisions. You have L'Oreal Luxe, Consumer Product Division, Professional Product Division, the Active Cosmetics, and the Active Cosmetics Division, all with their own brands and all with different operation functions. However, for the brands that I manage, I can tell you how our process came to be and where I came on board. A few years back, our creative team worked in a single space where marketing would come running into the creative room with urgent needs throughout the day. It was a black hole of jobs because we had an internal creative department. Everyone is asking for the world and the world to be done in a day. I'm sure if you guys all have had those experiences, I'm sure you have. They would have just left a meeting and needed a change made right now. And as you can already foretell, this was not the most effective way of working. There was no order. There was no clear understanding of what the designers were working on. And most of all, there was especially no metrics surrounding how the designer resources were being utilized. So once we started measuring all of this, we were able to see where the issues were happening in the department and categories to make everything more efficient. The process held both creative and marketing accountable. If marketing was making too many changes and holding up a project, or conversely, if creative was holding on to something for too long, we could see where the holes were, and by our tracking and logging systems that we had in place, see where the bottlenecks were happening and who the jobs were with. The process helped calm people's nerves, gave the team structure, and provided the teams paying for the freelance designers resource visibility into where their money was going. It has been through my experience building out a creative process that I've also learned that your team needs to know that someone has their back. We are all aware of the tasks from the client and that something needs to be completed. However, it is within the operation person's hands to be the buffer to avoid tension. But for anything to be really great and move beyond the status quo, we need to manage the place where the designers aren't too vulnerable, but have a healthy spot where they're able to manifest their creative energy. Which does get difficult when there are too many different client types, right? So at L'Oreal, our clients are the brand teams that fall under education, US marketing, global marketing, digital, PR, and shows and events. Creative is working to please so many people while also making sure there's a consistent branding thread throughout all of the various assets that are created. They have so much on their plates that without a clear process for all parties to follow, productivity can be sacrificed. So this leads us now to the first step in the listening process, defining the objective, which is listening to the client, right? We have to begin with listening to the client and or the overall brand teams as to what they are envisioning. They are the ones who have the marketing research to determine what should be pushed forward. It is simply the operations person's responsibility to help the designers figure out how to achieve the marketing direction in the most cost-effective and timely way. So then once we've established what the client wants, we then have to listen to our own team, our designers, because our designers have their own story. They have their own perspective. So we must begin listening to the designer's perspective on the project. This is where collaboration and diversity and thought process come into play. Everyone comes to the project with their own take on how it could be executed. However, it is on the designers to make sure that the end result is on brand. Creative needs the freedom to first explore, to push the limits of what is being asked of them. So on the L'Oreal side, I know our design teams, we like to create Pinterest boards. We play with design options, we combine design options, and then at the end, we take that exciting and cool design layout and apply it within a branded framework. So we're really pushing the elements and frameworks of what the marketing thought that they wanted and giving them something that goes beyond that wow factor, right? So then once we've established what the client wants, once we've gotten the design perspective, we then need, as operations people, to be the bridge. So now we're listening to both the client and the design team. And as an operations person, we are the go-between the designers and the client team. The designers need to know that the following objectives from the client, the who, what, when, where, and why. Who is the asset for? Is it consumer? Is it going, straight to production? Like what are we doing with this piece? What is the background context? Why is this piece important? What is this piece saying that makes it important? When is the asset due? So that's the art release date. How much time do we have? Is there a timeline? Is it for a meeting or a presentation? So giving the team a framework as to how much time they have to complete whatever asset they need, that marketing needs. Where will the asset live? Is it digital? Is it going to go into print? Why is the asset important? So that also touches upon the background context, right? So it essentially comes back to a solid brief. If all of the W's are answered from the beginning, then there should not be a bunch of holes from the onset. I always tell my team two things when it comes to briefing. One, no one should walk away from a brief without a clear understanding of what to do next. And two, the brief should be filled out in its entirety before it even comes to creative. If we can't take the brief and if we can't take it and run with it, especially given a tight timeline, then we need to start back from the beginning and we need to go back and have marketing look at filling in the holes. Where is their messaging? How many assets do they need and how do they need it delivered? Who needs to be involved? All of those things need to be established at the point of the brief. And that leads us into team dynamics. And within team dynamics, we're looking at our team structure, communication, and recognizing strengths and weaknesses. So when I talk about team dynamics, I'm referring less to a traditional or pod structure, but rather how valued your team feels within the structure. As someone who has worked within both a traditional and pod structure, how to get someone motivated to stay connected is by valuing them, valuing their opinion, their feedback, their voice within a project, and giving them the authority to make decisions. For me, a traditional pod structure is one where there are levels of hierarchy and tiers amongst a team. The projects need tiered approval to move forward. However, with a pod structure, there's a mix of job functions all together. So you have a lead designer, a marketing lead, a marketer, a coordinator, copywriter, etc., working under the same, in our respects, category maybe to move a project along. There are definitely pros and cons to each, in my opinion, but in either structure, the thing I would be careful around is how designers are viewed within either structure. I know some companies, unfortunately, have gotten into the habit of thinking and or saying how everyone is replaceable. Designers should be more than cogs to produce work, and people should feel that they are connected to the work. You have to keep them motivated by making them feel they're a part of something bigger and their design influences matter to the larger brand. And so in order to do that, you really have to look at communication, right? So strong communication between the team and the client is essential to yield a good product. Getting all parties together where designers, operations, and clients can come together to get feedback. There should be a constant give and take between the designers and clients to make the product the best it can be. And as the operations has to be the balance to keep everyone under the same task. So for us, I personally allow and encourage the marketing teams and the designers to talk, to have the communications and not just be as an operations person, be the mouthpiece for them. I think it instills a unity and connection and really makes everyone on the same page when it comes to the product. So, and thus enforcing product ownership. So as an operations person, we have all been a part of those emails where everything is starting to unravel. Time is running out. People are panicking. And good communication between two different departments goes back to the brief. So what does that mean? People need to know what's happening next from the operations. When is it time to deliver a project? Who do we talk to? What are we delivering? And where do we go next? Are all key questions that you as an operations person need to be able to respond to and inform the client and the design team, no matter the point that you're at, right? So if any one of the 5 W's, as we discussed, the who, what, when, where, why, earlier is missing, then in order to get things back on track, you need the teams to be in constant communication, and most of all, be transparent. I can recount a few scenarios where things can start to go astray. One being not letting the designers hold on to a job for too long to get it right before getting it into the client's hands. All right, we all know designers like to pick, and we have to keep things moving. So making sure that as an operations person, we're not letting bottlenecks happen. Make sure the messaging is on point before anything is finalized that is going to yield the best product. So from my perspective, we've been a part of so many meetings where the copy has not been established and, the design is actually moving forward, but then marketing wants to go back and tweak, because they're not really tweaking the design at this point. They keep tweaking the copy in the layout. So what is that creating? It's creating overruns and rounds, and you're not really getting the best out of the teams and utilizing them. And as we know, time is money. So at that point, we have to pause, right? We have to pause and make sure that marketing has a clear understanding of what they're doing, and that we can then implement that information into the design layout. But it doesn't serve anyone if we keep doing round after round after round for small tweaks and changes. And then there's another instance where briefs that have changed and it didn't route to the proper people, and it's already gone out to the client, and then we have to come back and start over, right? So it's rarely ever just a one draft thing and done. Once the client sees something on paper, they want to change it, and then get that critical feedback and messaging. That's where it's key to make sure that you're checking in and making the right calls throughout the project, throughout the life cycle of a project. So in this instance, taking it outside of marketing's hands, we have to recognize what's happening on our design team's hands and how they are really responding to the projects, and how they are the ones moving projects along on their own. And it comes into project ownership, right? So from an operations perspective, you have to know what your team is capable of and identifying the best people for the job, and be careful not to overload too many people. Not everyone can handle a lot of work. So you're constantly assessing your team and assessing the work and the projects that are coming forward. And you just have to see how people you lean on, how they handle the projects. I know I try not to have favorites on my team, but there are people who you just know can handle it, because whether they've been there for a long time or they know the brand really well. But you also have to make sure that you're not playing favorites, and that you're giving people the opportunity to upskill and then become that lead person. Because in my experience, it has been when you're working with a lot of freelance designers and people who aren't full-time employees, there's the risks that they're going to leave at some point. And so if you only have one person who knows everything and is that main point of contact for you, then that puts you at risk of things falling apart and creating backlog, because you're having to train people on the back end. So you have to get the right people in quickly and evaluate. Are they asking the right questions, the smart questions, in order to move a project along? How are they spending their time during the day? And do they have a strong foundation in design, and can they pick up the process quickly? So this is where I like to lean on my senior team. Having a conversation with your senior creatives and relying on them to ask, and relying on them to also recognize where people need to grow will help you determine team placements. Gathering all the information from all parties involved in order to speak to who would be the best fit. So sometimes you have to be that neutral person, right? I can't speak to a person's design capabilities directly, but I can see how are they responding to the process, and how much time are they taking on their designs, right? And how much time and communication. How are they communicating with the other designers? Are they communicating effectively and in a timely manner? Are they holding on to work? These are all the things that I'm evaluating. And I'm relying on my senior team, my senior creatives, to also give me that feedback, that nuanced feedback, so that we're able to see and convince the creative directors on who is the best fit. So in closing, I hope you're able to take away some food for thought on what it takes to foster creativity in a marketing-driven workplace that you can then use within your own operations. So at this time, I would just like to say thank you. I'm not really sure how we are on time, but I want to say thank you and open it up to any questions.
Thanks, Janine. Yeah, great presentation. Lots of good nuggets. I mean, for me, I picked up the importance of listening and communication, and really the importance of actually asking the right questions and getting that all squared away up front. But we do have a few minutes left, and I'd love to jump into some of the questions that the audience sent over your way. First one relates to the brief. Sometimes the brief becomes the place to store all information about the project. For projects that run long, the brief gets very, very busy. Eventually, the what to do next isn't so clear. So that's where we've had problems. Any suggestions for keeping a clean brief?
Yeah, what I like to ask is that people submit their briefs in advance of a scheduled brief meeting. This gives me the opportunity to look at what's been provided and the information and see where there's holes, so that I can then respond back to them before we get everyone together in a meeting to go through what the needs are. So see where the holes are. So yeah, that's how I like to avoid meetings going too long.
Next question is, how do you handle last minute ad hoc projects that come through and attempt to bypass your process?
Yeah,
great question.
that is a great question, because that does happen. I try to nip it when I see it. I try to stay firm on people to adhere to our briefing schedule and our briefing process. There are times where projects will, have to take priority over another project that the team is currently working on. But in those instances, I go back to, a strong brief. If this is a fast turnaround, what is the art release date? And then I will try to squeeze them in, and I will also alert the team in advance. Hey, this is coming down the pipeline. There's going to be some adjustments in the schedule, and just give them as much forewarning as possible, and make sure communication is still open on all fronts between marketing and creative, so there's no surprises.
Right. Back to good communication. Tied to that, though, is in terms of prioritization, how do you prioritize the work of one brand over the other?
Yeah, that's
the question, right?
Yeah, that's when managing 3 brands and everyone has an I need it now moment. What I like to do is we have status meetings. And we then look at all of the jobs and look at all of the art release dates. And honestly, I stay in communication with marketing. Our marketing teams know that we have a set number of designers and we have a long list of projects. So I look at the art release dates. I'll sometimes negotiate different art release dates. So it's a back and forth. It's a constant back and forth and negotiation when it comes to balancing all three brands and having the meetings with the designers to make sure that they're not overloaded and that they are able to meet the date. So having check-ins and status meetings, it's the only way. I have a long Excel spreadsheet of all the things.
I bet you
that
do.
answers your question.
Samantha would like to know, do you allow unlimited time on these projects, or do you set budgets and track time spent? And if so, how do you keep designers within budget? Any tips?
No, I don't have an unlimited time. Because the way we work, that all the designers' hours are tracked, and that costs time and money. So I do alert marketing and let them know, hey guys, you're already going over in rounds, which means it's coming up to this costing. Or if there's a long list from one particular category of jobs, and I have a set number of designers working on that job, across that category of jobs, then I take it back to the department heads, and make them have the call and have them reprioritize their jobs and get extended art release dates, so that we stay in a constant balance.
Got it. Next one has to do with speed. Is speed to activation a problem once you're finished with an asset, getting it online, in print, or on TV, or out of home?
Yeah.
So speed to activation.
It's not typically a problem on our end because our creative team, we function as pretty much an in-house agency. So we're working on projects from concept to execution. So we're typically the ones releasing the assets out, and the marketing will release, if it's a global project, release to the outside countries. So we know the timelines, and creative is involved throughout every milestone of a project. So we're very much aware.
Got it. Next question is, does your team work in an agile environment? And I guess we're talking about agile, stand-up meetings, Scrum, Kanban, backlog, stories, all that fun stuff that goes with agile.
Yeah. I think we're trying to be more agile.
I hear that a lot.
Yeah. I think as an operations person, that kind of makes me like, oh God, because I try to be flexible, but I do like a process. I do like having clear understandings of where things are at and who's working on what. I think if you become too agile, I think you start losing a little bit of the structure to things, but I like to say the word flexible.
Flexibility is good.
Yeah.
We're getting close on time, so maybe just one more question for you. And we try to stay vendor agnostic, but the question has to do with, what type of tools do you use to manage the creative projects? So what kind of tools are you using?
Yeah. I do have a project management software that we use, and it's more for like timesheet tracking, and we like to provide coding for each of the projects. So that helps us keep track and make sure that, if a project name is maybe redundant to another brand's project name, we can always rely on the code in that instance. And then I use Excel quite a bit for metrics and for creating team tracking. Sometimes for me, it's easier to go back to basics. And I don't like to put too many software needs on the designers, because I want them to be able to design, right? And
Right.
So the software that I use is more for the management side, to make sure the costing and all of that back end stuff is done, and then the designers just kind of do it timesheets, and not too much more. So I want to give them the opportunity to actually
Right.
use their creative freedoms and not be
Exactly.
bogged down with the little stuff.
Exactly what you hired them to do. Well, Janine, we're out of time, but thank you so much. This was really great. Great job on the presentation. Great engagement from the chat session. So on behalf of everyone, appreciate, great job today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.